5:30. That clock is slow, so you can't count on that one. So I'm going to open this meeting of the Planning Commission. The chair has nothing to report. Does the vice chair have anything to report?
The vice chair has nothing to report either.
Thank you. Report of the director. Wayne, you got something?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Okay. This is our little open forum moment. So does anybody have anything they want to bring up?
I have a question, Wayne.
Sure.
So we'll just be specific. So the Shopko development, those 3 buildings, which happened before I was on the commission, so I had nothing to do with it. But I remember one of the components of that for pedestrian engagement was they were going to do like a gallery of art in that second building, and it's still empty. You just look at a concrete wall. And so I'm wondering if that was a provision of that approval, what's the city's or planning's response when they don't fulfill that component?
Excuse me. Yeah, if it's a condition of approval, then they're required to do that. And so I'll make a note of that. We'll look into it. And then if need be, becomes a zoning enforcement issue.
Yeah, I don't know how that was conditioned because I wasn't on the planning commission.
Yeah.
And I may not have paid as much attention to those details as I do now, but.
So this is the new building, the University of Utah Health Building?
Yeah, but it's the second one.
Right.
It's actually by the office building, and it's part of the parking
Correct.
structure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's that one.
Yep. I'll
Yeah,
make a
I-
note of it. And we'll
I was around
check
when
it
that
out.
one happened, but I don't remember the conditions.
You were, that's right.
I know.
What happened? I do remember.
I
it
remember a
was
lot of discussion about it, and
to
it
be
came
a
back
gallery,
twice.
which
but-
I think is not, I'm not happy with those anyway, but it
Okay.
hasn't even happened, so. Thank
Okay.
you. That's all I wanted to bring up.
Anything from anyone else? Okay, then we will move on to, I was going to suggest to the audience, if you want to speak on something, get one of these cards from the table outside the door and pass that up to us. You can write your comment on there or just say which item you want to speak on. Consent agenda. I need a motion to consider the consent agenda.
I move that we consider the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Amy Berry and a second from Amy Burrows. Let's see, Commissioner Gale is not here. Commissioner Gent, surprise.
I'm back. I actually would like the commission to consider that we move item 5 of the regular agenda to the consent agenda.
Can we do that?
Yes, we can. I talked to Aubrey about it. Well,
Oh.
Paul's here, but
Paul's here, okay. Oh, number 5 is the site distance triangle amendment.
That's a legislative item. We cannot move legislative items to consent.
Okay,
We are required to have a public hearing on those.
I thought in the consent agenda procedures that are in our Dropbox folder, we have a public hearing, even if it's on the consent agenda, if it's an item that is required to have a public hearing. I thought that was acceptable under consent agenda procedures. It's under our Dropbox folder. Every item on our agenda should indicate whether a public hearing is necessary, and we can have the public hearing as part of the consent agenda.
I mean, I like the idea, but let me just.
I mean, we can
back
just
on
check
the-
into it for
yeah,
next time. It's not going to be a big deal. But if you could look into it for next time, that'd be great.
Happy to do it.
thank you. So I have a motion to consider the consent agenda from Commissioner Berry, a second from Commissioner Burrows. Commissioner Gent, I was asking for a vote, sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. So unanimously, we will consider the consent agenda. Is there any discussion among members of the commission on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing on the consent agenda. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on the two items that are on the consent agenda? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on the consent agenda, or for the public hearing on the consent agenda. And since we don't seem to have any discussion on those items, I need a motion to pass the consent agenda.
I move to pass the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Christensen and a second from Commissioner Berry. Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Gent,
Yes.
and the chair will also vote yes. It's a unanimous decision to pass the consent agenda. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. The first item on the regular agenda is a design review and plan development for the Ballpark Apartments development at approximately 1365 South Jefferson Street. Case numbers PLN PCM 2022-11011185 and PLN PCM 2023-00160. Amanda, welcome.
Hope you're all doing well. All right. This is a design review and planned development application for the Ballpark Apartments on approximately 1365 South Jefferson Street. The applicant is Doug Thim with Architectural Nexus, representing the property owner. The request would facilitate the redevelopment of 4 parcels, approximately 0.75 acres. The property is located just west of the ballpark and south of 1300 South. The applicant is specifically requesting additional building height through the design review process and modifications to setback and landscaping requirements. The property is in the CG zoning district and within the new ballpark stationary plan, and staff is recommending approval with conditions. So the project includes 115 units. There's 2,500 square feet of ground floor retail, 123 parking stalls, including on-street parking. And then there are also 5 pedestrian entrances off of Jefferson, which is the elevation shown here. It is on the corner of Jefferson and Albemarle Avenue. Say it 2 times fast, you'll mess up. And that avenue also has pedestrian amenities and ground floor activation for the tenants. The applicant is requesting 85 feet of building height. In the CG zone, the maximum building height is 60. You can get up to 90 feet with design review approval. They are asking for planned development approval to reduce the front yard area and landscape area from 10 feet to 5 feet. In the CG zone, the front yard area for the front, corner, side, and rear is 10 feet, and all yard areas need to be landscaped. And then they are also requesting a reduction in the landscape buffer yard, which is at the rear of the property, abutting the residential district, from 15 feet to 10 feet. The property to the east is zoned RB residential business. And the final request is related to the design review. So if you request a design review in the CG zone, one of the stipulations is that you have to provide 10% additional landscaping on top of what would be required under base zoning. So they're requesting to locate some of the landscaping on the podium instead of in the ground to obtain this additional building height. And the landscaping is related to the floor area. It's 10% of the floor area. So the standards for compliance, design review, purposes, does it support the purpose of the zoning district? Does it comply with the design review standards? Consistency with master plan goals and policies, which is Plan Salt Lake and the Ballpark Station Area Plan. And standards for plan development, they need to achieve at least one objective. Their project meets the housing, mobility, and master plan implementation objectives. Staff believes the project results in a more enhanced product than what would be achievable through strict application of the CG zone. And the project is consistent with the Ballpark Stationary Plan. This property is located in the heart of the neighborhood, which right now has a lot of light industrial uses, and it's expected to be redeveloped with mid to high density housing, retail, and become a more pedestrian-friendly space that would work well with the stadium. Even though the stadium will be moving, that site will be reimagined and is still expected to be an active site for the neighborhood. I'll go into the modifications. So the design review is for the additional building height. By right is 60 feet. You can go up to a maximum of 90. If the increased height will result in improved site layout and amenities. If additional floors are approved, the amount of increased landscaping shall be equal to 10% of the area of the additional floors. The applicant is requesting 85 feet, which is to the top of the parapet. The additional floors result in 42,000 square feet of floor area, which means they need to provide 4,200 square feet of landscaped area. The additional height allows the floor area in the middle of the podium structure where the units would be located to be opened up into an amenity space, a podium level courtyard. The additional height also allows for the developer to provide ground floor parking, retail, and amenity space. And the project does have more than the required 10%. Plan development request to relocate the 10% landscaping that was required via the design review. They are requesting to locate 4,200 square feet of landscaping from the ground to the podium. The courtyard is actually 5,500 square feet. And then there's also a rooftop amenity space, which is 1,000 square feet, which is not counted in this. If built by right without any height or setback modifications, the required landscape area for this site would be 7,100 square feet. When you add the additional building height, the 10%, that landscape requirement goes to 11,300 square feet. And overall, with all the modifications, the proposal provides about 12,000 square feet, so above what would be required by right. The applicant is requesting a reduced front yard area. They're requesting a 5-foot reduction, which results in about 1,000 square feet. The front yard area would go from 10 feet to 5 feet. To mitigate this, they are providing increased side yard setbacks. So in the CG zone, you do not need an interior side yard. They are proposing 7 feet, and that's at the top of the screen. And that will be the start of a mid-block connection, which is called out in the Ballpark Stationary Plan as the connection to the future Festival Street. So that'll be the start of that mid-block. And then they're also expanding the setback area to the south of the project area from required 10 feet to 15 feet. They are requesting a reduced landscape buffer. The required buffering next to a residential property is 15 feet, and they are requesting a 5-foot reduction to 10 feet. The property to the east is zoned residential business, but the property is currently waiting. There's a petition waiting for city council hearing, and they've requested to be zoned TSA. The city is also proposing to rezone this whole area TSA, which planning staff is currently working on. And so if either property is rezoned in the future, it will the landscaping buffer will not be required anymore. But either way, the applicant is proposing the rear yard area to be a dog run that's secure with fencing that's transparent and lockable. And then the rear yard also has a 17-foot alleyway separating it from the property to the east. Here is the front of the existing building on the site. Site photos. Here is Jefferson Street looking all the directions, north, south. On the top left is the alleyway that I just spoke about, and the bottom is just the back of the property, and this would all be against that residential district. Small alleyway. There is an existing ballpark apartments with a separation between the ball and the park, and it's right next to the subject property, but on West Temple. And then there's the property directly east and Smith's Ballpark across the street. Staff is recommending approval with conditions that condition 1 would be that all 4 lots must be consolidated prior to a building permit being issued. Signage, lighting, and site details may be finalized administratively, and then we are also requiring a public access easement to ensure the public can use the sidewalk. It's on private property, and Albemarle Avenue is too narrow to provide a sidewalk in it. An extended sidewalk is about 12 feet, so we are requiring a public access easement. And with that, based on the information in the staff report, planning staff is recommending that, or it is planning staff's opinion that the request meets applicable design review and plan development standards of approval, and recommends the Planning Commission approve with the conditions listed in the staff report. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Is your applicant here?
Yes.
Come on up. Does he have a presentation?
Yes, they
Okay.
do.
I see him with the computer there.
I'll pull it up for them. And
Okay, I'll need you to introduce yourselves, speak into the microphone so
Okay.
it gets on the record.
Okay, how are we doing? All right.
Good.
You'll be moving the slides for
If
the
you wanna do
presentation?
it.
I can do it.
So we'll give you like 10 minutes to kind of do your presentation, and then we'll do questions for both of you afterwards.
Yeah, and we won't even need that much time, so we'll be quick. I'm Meghna Dobre. I'm with Architectural Nexus. We're the design team here in Salt Lake City, and this is Daniel.
My name is Daniel Radovsky, and I'm a member of the ownership group.
We know there's a lot going on in Salt Lake, and especially in this neighborhood with the ballpark moving and all this development happening, so we're really excited to be part of that effort and that development. We've been working with Amanda for about 6 months now, I think, and we really appreciate all the input she's given us and all the feedback and time, and I think we all think it's made the project much better for that feedback, so thank you for that. She's mentioned already that we've made some transformations to the project with adding some amenity space and adding some retail space based on that feedback, so we've really appreciated that. We presented to the Ballpark Community Council, and there was an online presentation. There were about 60 plus residents there, and it was great to receive their feedback as well, and the support was unanimous. We really didn't receive any negative comments. They had some specific questions that we talked through, but nothing negative, so that was great to hear. We've also, as mentioned in the staff report, we've also worked with the transportation department to make sure that our street sections and connections all work well. So I'll just get into the presentation. Amanda's kind of mentioned a lot of the technical details already, so I'll just focus on a few of the design features. We have a main entrance and lobby located on the corner on Jefferson and the new mid-block connection. We're proposing some retail space, so these are some of the existing conditions that we've talked about already. Proposing some retail space as we move through our parking entrance and then a secondary lobby. So we've really tried to work to activate that street, to provide transparency, provide eyes on the street, and really kind of look to provide a safe environment, additional amenities for pedestrians like street trees, bike parking, seating, and things like that, both on Jefferson and on Albemarle. We have a podium level, third floor terrace space that was already mentioned, which again opens up onto Jefferson in order to provide maximum visibility and connection to the street. And the seventh floor amenity that also kind of focuses on that pedestrian street access. The Albemarle side, we were able to add some amenity space and kind of provide, we do need some walls for structural shear and things like that, but we tried to add as much transparency as possible and as much activation as possible as we work through these. The program, we've already talked about number of units and things like that. We talked about the mid-block connection. I'll go on to the site plan. We're hoping that the neighbor to the north will support the same connection and provide an additional 7 or 8 feet to really make that a nice connection through. But between Albemarle and the north block connection, we feel like that really adds to the pedestrian circulation in the area. And the staff report talks about, this is really one of the first sites to develop here, so we're hoping this will set the tone for future developments to provide the same level of pedestrian circulation and amenities that we're talking about. The parking and trash and everything like that is enclosed in the building and screened from the building, or screened from the public right-of-ways, so as not to create any negative impact. And I wanted to talk a little bit about just a small clarification on the setbacks. And the man has explained all of it very well. Where these modifications, the slight modifications that we're asking for, are all in order to be able to provide the additional street amenity and still be able to fit the parking on the site. And they're all very much in line with the master plan and with the future zoning for the site and the surrounding sites. And we do have a kind of a nice buffer between our lot and the neighboring lot, which is that 17-foot alley. I think that was the summary of what we wanted to present. So I don't know, Daniel, if there's anything else to...
Do you have anything else?
I just want to add thank you very much for your consideration, and we look forward to your questions.
Okay. Bring it back to the commission. Questions, concerns?
Maybe, are you married to calling it Ballpark Apartments?
No, actually, we've moved away from that name. Given there is another apartment nearby, the ballpark is moving. We've actually recently found out that the street address we've gotten a certified street address from the engineering department, and it's going to be 1345 Jefferson. So right now the working name is 1345 Jefferson Street, but we might end up with something different once the marketing and everything is done.
Okay. That seemed to be one of the big questions. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, just hang out there for a bit and we'll do the public hearing, and then you can respond to whatever comments we get. So is there anyone in the audience from the Ballpark Community Council who wants to speak on this item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this item in general? Are there any emails? Wayne, that's you. Emails.
No emails, thank you.
Okay, seeing no one that wants to comment, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any questions? A motion? You may get off easy.
Sure, I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Kent.
Based on the information presented and in the discussion, I move that the commission approve the design review and plan development with the following modifications. The 4 lots must be consolidated prior to the issuance of a building permit. All signage, lighting, and site details may be site details. Need my reading glasses. May be finalized administratively, and a public access easement shall be recorded to ensure the public may use the sidewalk along Albemarle Avenue, which is on private property.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Gent and a second by Commissioner De Oliveira. Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Gent,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry,
Yes.
and Commissioner De Oliveira.
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. You got a unanimous approval. Thank you.
Very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is the planned development for the Other Side Village at approximately 1850 West Indiana Avenue. Case number PLN PCM 2023-00161. Riley,
Thank you.
you're going to have to get really close to the mic.
Is that okay? Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Don't be shy. Just
The applicant is requesting plan development approval for a project called the Other Side Village. The proposal requests relief from several standards in the FBUN2 zone. Staff recommends approval for the proposal with several conditions. The property is bounded by I-215 and Indiana Avenue on the western and southern sides, and the project site will be in the southeastern corner of the parcel, and it's about 8 acres. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was in the presentation mode.
yeah, that's your regular screen. Go-
Sorry.
It's okay.
Just a second.
Don't be nervous.
There we go.
Much better.
Okay. The Other Side Village is intended to be a walkable neighborhood of mixed uses that will provide housing, supportive services, and employment opportunities for unsheltered people and individuals struggling with substance abuse, mental illness, and/or physical disabilities. The site will have up to 60 dwelling units for residents and an ancillary neighborhood center with laundry and kitchen facilities, up to 25 motel units, a social enterprise building which will house employment opportunities for village residents. The proposed uses of this building include food production and retail space. The site will also have a medical services and administration building, which will provide supportive services, offices, and multi-purpose space. Lastly, the site will have a grocery store, which will be located within the medical services building that will provide groceries for village residents and the public. These are some of the elevations that have been provided by the applicant that show some of the different buildings on site. There are several models of residential building types proposed. I have included examples of one single-family dwelling type model and a two-family dwelling type model. The elevations for the neighborhood center, which will be located near the residences, and I have also included the medical services and administration building and the social enterprise building, which will be located closest to Indiana Avenue. The subject property is owned by the city and was formerly a municipal landfill until 1963. The waste at that site was subsequently buried, and since then the city has used the site to process green waste. Because of this, the applicant is required to enter into a voluntary cleanup program that will be supervised by the Utah Department of Environmental Quality. This will ensure the site is safe for habitation. More information on this program can be found on the city's sustainability website. The Other Side Village proposal was first presented to the city early 2022. Later that year, a rezone was approved for the property to change the zoning designation from public lands to the FBUN2 zone, which stands for Form-Based Urban Neighborhood. The City Council adopted the rezone ordinance and required a development agreement to regulate on-site uses and requirements for operation. These terms designated an 8-acre pilot project area and include minimum requirements for the uses provided on site, requirements for design elements, and factors that will be used to determine the success of the project. The intent of the applicant is to later extend the other side village to the remainder of the property area. The site has several limitations to development. First of all, the project is limited to an 8-acre area in the southeastern corner of the site, and this area must provide all of the uses and design elements that are required by the adopted resolution. There is an existing utility easement that runs north to south through the center of the property, and this utility easement is about 42 feet wide. There is remediation requirements through the voluntary cleanup program that the applicant will be required to provide. And lastly, there is a Union Pacific easement for an abandoned railroad that runs along the southern border of the property. This easement may limit the location of future vehicle access to the site. There are several modifications that are proposed to be approved through the plan development process. The existing limitations to development of the site greatly influence the design and layout, which has resulted in this process. There are standards that are required by the FBUN2 zoning code that would not be feasible to meet, such as locating all buildings within 10 feet of the front property line along Indiana Avenue. The proposed site layout provides all of the required uses in a way that is efficient and promotes the goals of the other side village. Some of these standards that are included to be modified include allowing multiple buildings on a parcel that do not have street frontage. Given the dimensional nature of the pilot project area, it would not be feasible for these buildings to have frontage on Indiana Avenue and be located within 10 feet of Indiana Avenue. Also proposed is a modified cottage-style development. The FBUN2 zone limits cottage developments to have only single-family building or dwelling unit types. The applicant has proposed to include both two-family dwelling unit types and multifamily dwelling unit types, in addition to single-family. The FBUN2 zone also requires at least 50% of street-facing building facades to be located within 10 feet of the front property line. The social enterprise building closest to Indiana Avenue is located further away than 10 feet to accommodate the future 9-lane public trail that will run along Indiana Avenue in front of the property. This building will also exceed the maximum allowed facade length of 200 feet. This is due to the location of the existing utility easement. If the applicant were to propose a design that would break up this building into two buildings, the area is very limiting and it would not be feasible to do. Additional modifications include a proposal to exceed the maximum curb cut width area for vehicle accesses at Indiana Avenue and to exceed the maximum number of allowed vehicle accesses from the street, which is limited to 1 for this property. 2 accesses are required by the fire department to allow safe access and circulation, and the existing Union Pacific easement along the front of the property may also limit future access to the property. In the event future access and improvements are not allowed within this area, access to the rest of the site would be provided by the 2 proposed intersections that are shown on the site plan. The proposal meets almost all of the plan development objectives. The one that is not met by this proposal is the objective for historical preservation. But I want to highlight the 2 main objectives that are met by the proposal, which is housing and sustainability. The housing that will be provided by the village is unique as it aims to serve a specific demographic that is in need of affordable housing options. The objective for sustainability will be met as the project will remediate a former landfill site. The project is also consistent with the overall goals of the FBUN2 zone, which include providing people-oriented spaces, options for housing, and increased architectural design standards. These design standards include requirements for entry features and architectural design of building facades for durable materials and glass. All residences will provide a required entry feature in the form of a porch that will be at least 6 feet in depth. The social enterprise building and medical services building meet all design standards for non-residential buildings in this zone. And the social enterprise building exceeds these requirements by providing multiple breaks in massing and material to break up the apparent length of the building. Glass is also used along both of these buildings to increase pedestrian interest and interaction along future sidewalks. The proposal was noticed to the recognized organizations and fulfilled the requirements of the early engagement noticing. As of now, staff has received no public comment on the proposal. Staff also attended a Glendale Community Council meeting. The proposal seemed to be well received, and the Glendale Community Council did not provide comments. Staff has recommended several proposed conditions of approval due to the unique nature of the project. These relate to delegating review and approval of final details and some modifications that may be needed to the plans. This may include modifications to parking, fencing, and setback requirements, and minor modifications that may be required by the development agreement, lease agreement, or environmental remediation plan. Final details of the site include lighting, pedestrian circulation, and screening of service areas. Lastly, it is staff's opinion that the request generally meets the applicable standards of approval and recommends the Planning Commission approve the request with the conditions that are listed in the staff report. And that is my presentation. I'm
Thank you.
happy to take any questions.
We'll hold the questions. Is your applicant here? And do they have a presentation?
I
Or do they
believe they'd
just-
like to speak for a few minutes.
Okay. Come on up, sit down, give us your name in the mic so we get on the record and talk close to it.
Thank you. My name is Tim Stay. I'm the CEO of the Other Side Village, a nonprofit organization that has pulled this project together. And I just have a few comments with no presentation. First, I want to thank all of you as members of the Planning Commission for your time, for your service. I didn't understand the level of work that you were involved in. Thank you. Also want to thank Riley and Amy Thompson for the great guidance and navigating as we sometimes stumbled in trying to make sure we met all the requirements, and appreciate their patience with us. We've gotten great support from Maureen Goff, from Blake Thomas, from Tammy, all from the mayor's office to help us guide this, as this has been in partnership. And lastly, all the city departments have been helpful in helping us move through this process and help figure out sometimes some complex issues that conflicted with making sure we can keep in compliance with all the requirements from the different departments. And lastly, thank the mayor for her support and the partnership we have with her. I just want to take a minute to emphasize a few points. When you look at the code of the form-based unit, the purpose statement is that the form-based districts are to create urban neighborhoods that provide people-oriented places, options to housing types, options in terms of shopping, dining, fulfilling daily needs within walking distance, transportation options, access to employment opportunities, appropriately scaled buildings, safe, accessible, interconnected networks for people, and increased desirability as a place to work, live, play, and invest through higher quality form and design. When you look at the statement on the intent of the form-based district, it says form-based districts provide places for people to live, work, and play within a close proximity. We believe that this project meets every one of those purposes and the intent of the code. We see that we run into some some areas where there needs to be some modification because we're a unique project that I think when the code was developed hadn't been anticipated. And so we have the public street of Indiana Avenue, but we can't get all the houses next to Indiana Avenue. We have 2 entrances, but the fire department, to be able to service those homes, needs 2 entrances. Not all the buildings can face, be close to the public. We have different forms of the single unit. We've put some together as a duplex, one as a quad, in order to meet the density requirements that the city council has provided for us. So I think in each case, we've maintained the spirit and the purpose and the intent of what this zone requires, and we're just needing some modifications on these minor variations. Yeah, I really appreciate the time, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions that you would like to ask the applicant?
Riley, I just have one question for you. So one of the things they're exceeding is the maximum 200 feet length for one of the building, and in the report it says the things that they'll do to mitigate that. But that's not listed as a condition. So is that something that you'll oversee no matter what? Or does that need to be spelled out that to make sure that the architectural features that break up the design actually happen? Because it's already, so it's exceeding that, but you haven't listed the mitigation for that as a condition. Is there an assumption that they're just going to be doing it, or will that be an oversight issue for staff as well?
There's assumption that they are providing the increased architectural design or features based on the elevations that have been provided.
So is that something that in order to sign off, you'll make sure that that it meets that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to understand if that was something we had to condition, or if we could move forward feeling confident that that would play out.
I believe it would be included within like the final details that will be delegated to staff, which is included as a condition.
Thank you, Riley.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So
Sure.
on the report, it mentioned that the tiny homes are being built on top of what used to be a landfill. But then when I read a few news articles, it talked about the spot, the area, the few acres where the homes are being built, it was never used as a landfill. Maybe the area adjacent to it was a landfill. So which is it? Was it a landfill, and what will be required?
That process is ongoing, and it's overseen by UDEC. Tim might be able to speak more to where exactly contamination has been identified.
Yeah, we've worked closely with the Office of Sustainability within Salt Lake City, as well as Department of Environmental Quality at the state. The historic landfill actually is to the west of where we're building the homes. It's about 17 feet higher than the land we're building on. That's what where the landfill was capped, with about 5 feet of soil to cap it. So in some places we see native soil where we're looking. There have been some green waste deposited there by Salt Lake City, as they take trees and grind them up to make wood chips and things like that. There have been some other waste. There are a couple of contaminated spots, but they're minor, a few thousand feet of area, but that was one of the things we checked very early on, was the entire site extensively contaminated, and we just haven't seen any evidence. We've done extensive testing with Terracon to find that.
Anything else? Anyone? Okay, just hang tight right there. I'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone from the community council that's Glendale?
Glendale and Poplar Grove.
And Poplar Grove. Anyone from the community council here who'd like to speak on this? Anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? Is that for this item? Okay. All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion A motion? Anyone?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Christensen.
Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the commission approves this application with the conditions listed in the staff report.
A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Tuttle. So I have a motion by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Commissioner Tuttle. Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Gent,
Yes.
and the chair will also vote yes. You have a unanimous approval. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the third item on our agenda tonight. It's the Milk Block Adaptive Reuse Design Review at approximately 416 East, 900 South. Case number PLN PCM 2023-0070. Trevor, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Alrighty. So, this is a conditional design review for an adaptive reuse project at the Southeast Market Building at 416 East, 900 South. What? Oh, yeah, that's just the first slide. We're just getting rolling here. Yeah. I like to set the mood with just the opening thing first. Yeah. Yeah. The applicant is Mary Warner, representing the property owner, Kathy Adeng. And here's the real first slide. Okay, perfect. I'm doing that for the next presentation too, so don't get nervous. Okay. Okay. The project is within the CB Community Business Zoning District. Design review approval is required in this zoning district for buildings with a footprint over 7,500 square feet or over 15,000 gross square feet of floor area overall. The building will exceed this size when the project is completed. The applicant is also requesting a modification to surface area screening requirements. And staff is recommending approval with one condition. So this is a rendering provided by the applicant. They are proposing to renovate the existing building, add 4 one-bedroom apartment units to the upper level, and update the ground floor for a new market and retail space. The ground floor facade will be mostly glass with the exception of 4 ceramic-clad pillars. The applicant intends to remove the existing stucco and restore the upper floor brick facade if possible. This is a site rendering provided by the applicant. As you can see, they're proposing a new patio area in front of the building and quite a bit of landscape improvements. The design of the site will interact with the new 9-lane trail, which is currently under construction. The proposal complies with all relevant zoning requirements, standards for design review, and all but one design standard that I'll go over on a different slide. The ground floor uses will engage with pedestrians and will create an improved site layout and amenities. The proposal is supported by several initiatives and policies in Plan Salt Lake and the Central Community Master Plan that includes support for small-scale mixed-use development, adaptive reuse, and walkability. The property was rezoned from RB, residential business, and CN, neighborhood commercial, to CB in 2018 to facilitate this project. Zoning in the area is typically limited to small-scale commercial along 900 South, single-family residential to the south, and medium-density residential to the north. The site is bordered by mostly single-family homes to the south, Manoli's restaurant to the west, and several small businesses across the street to the north and east. There's a surface parking lot to the north of the existing building with 24 off-street parking spaces and 10 on-street parking spaces in the park strip area. Here are a few diagrams provided by the applicant that show the surface area to the rear of the building and the portion of the building that is to be demolished. I mentioned in an earlier slide that the proposal does not comply with one design standard, which is 21A 37050K, which requires service areas to be fully screened from public view. This proposal does not meet this design standard because the loading area to the rear of the building is very close to the rear property line in Grace Court, which is a narrow, one-way private street directly to the south. The applicant intends to demolish a portion of the building adjacent to the southern property line, which will create additional space for loading vehicles and increase the building's setback from the single-family homes to the south. Screening this area would make the loading area unusable due to dimensional constraints and would reduce the functionality of Grace Court. The Planning Commission has the authority to modify any design standard through the design review process if the applicant can demonstrate that the modification meets the intent of the standards for design review and any adopted design guidelines that may apply. The intent of this standard is to locate service uses out of view from the public right-of-way. The service area will be located behind the building and will not be visible from the public right-of-way without any screening. Staff finds that this meets the intent of the standard and the modification is appropriate considering the historic layout of the site and the applicant's goal of repurposing this historic building. Granting this modification will allow the applicant to continue using this area for loading and will allow for a better product overall. Staff has received 21 comments in support of the project and 2 in opposition. The comments have been included in the staff report. Staff received a letter of opposition that was signed by several neighbors on Grace Court. The letter mentioned concerns regarding impact on parking, street access, and trash pickup. Staff is recommending approval with the condition listed in the staff report because the proposal meets the design review standards, zoning standards, and complies with master plan policies and goals. And this is the only condition that staff is recommending, which is to delegate final review of signage, lighting, and streetscape improvements to staff. These details have not yet been finalized, but they will need to be finalized when the applicant submits plans for building permit for review. And that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here.
Okay, is your applicant, do they have a presentation or?
Yes.
Okay.
They have some
Why don't you
renderings they want to go
bring
over.
up your applicant and get close to the microphone and state your name for the record so we know who you are. And then you'll have 10 minutes to do your presentation, and then we'll bring it back for questions.
Okay, I'm Mary Warner. I'm the architect on the job. This is Kathia Dang, the owner and developer. Trevor covered most of the items applicable to our application, and I just wanted to point out a few things and sort of do a walkthrough of what the building is and what our intent is with the project. So the proposed 2-story mixed-use project seeks to revive the existing historic building while adding 4 live-work units.
I think you need to get a little closer to the microphone.
While adding 4 live-work units
Much
to the
better.
upper level. This will serve to breathe new life into an important neighborhood commercial node by providing a new market space as well as other retail and restaurant opportunities. This project proposes to keep a portion of the existing building. The existing building is an original OP Skaggs Market that was built in 1941. The brick structure has 2 architecturally interesting areas on the interior with bow truss roofs, and we're proposing to keep those 2 areas with the bow truss roofs at the front of the building. So the front of the building and the west wall will remain. Our intent with the front of the building is to remove the less than desirable 1990s facade remodel that was done with EIFS and stucco. Our hope is to restore the brick that is beneath. The original photos of the building show tile work that we think is likely damaged due to the stucco attachment over the years. Let's see. With this project, we will be going through selective demo of certain areas that are failing, have been neglected over time. The rear and the east wall will be removed. Removing these walls will provide an opportunity to rebuild adequate structure while adding the small residential component to the project. We proposed the demo to be about 6,000 square feet. So the total new and existing footprint of the building will be at 11,644 square feet. This is actually 1,000 square feet less on the main level than what is there now. One of the reasons we're doing that is to ease congestion at Grace Court and provide an area for deliveries to the retail component. It's important to note that these retail and restaurant areas have utilized this area for 80 plus years. And we intend to maintain that, but part of our project is to remove the back portion of the building to allow all of that circulation to remain on site and not disrupt circulation on Grace Court. Let's see. I just wanted to touch on a couple of the design standards for the design review. The existing building will remain oriented to 9th South Sidewalk and the future 9 line. The project intends to maintain this orientation and improve upon it, which will facilitate commercial retail that is pedestrian-oriented and bike-friendly. When looking at the building facade, a large amount of glass will be maintained on the 900 South facade. We plan to restore that building facade. It remains to be seen what we can restore and what will need to be replaced. But we're hoping that the brick can be restored, and then we'll have to sort of rejuvenate the Art Deco corner piece that we believe is underneath the existing stucco. The proposed elevations show added vertical elements between the tenant spaces, as well as the Art Deco architectural component on the corner. This project does not propose to increase the building height at the front of the facade, but rather improve and restore the look of the building from the front. Part of the design process that we've gone through is we'd like to add the residential component to this project, but we've set that residential component back about 10 feet from the front and about 4 feet from the sides that it abuts. And this only runs along the east side and the south side of the building. And last, I just wanted to touch on a few site design items of this project that are related to the design standards. Do we have a site?
Yes.
Yeah, that helps. Okay. There's several privately owned public space that we'll be providing. We intend to have a sculptural art piece plaza right where the parking comes in off 9th South, as well as several outdoor dining spaces. Let's see. And then again, just touching on that removing that back portion of the building to ease congestion along Grace Court. That leads me to just cover the modification to the service area screening. It's important to note that that area of Grace Court is a private right-of-way. It's not a public right-of-way, and there won't be visual on that screened or on that service area from the public right-of-way. Again, it's an existing component to the building, and we're hoping to keep the building and still utilize this piece of the project. I think that's it. And
Do you have anything? Yes, please. Kathia Dang, the owner of the property as well as the developer of the milk block. Before I speak, Trevor, can you pull up the existing building photo for me to stare at so that you can all see what we're working with? I made some notations, but since Mary and Trevor did all of the factual stuff, I guess I'm just going to speak from the heart, because this for me has truly been a labor of love, and the only way to speak to it and address it is from the heart. It has been a 5-year process, which started with rectifying a split zone issue, in which we successfully were able to obtain a CB zone. And respectfully, at our first Liberty Wells Community Council meeting, we addressed the public, and we sort of presented this plan and made a promise to the public that we would use this this property and not level it. We will not bring in a wrecking ball. This building was built in 1941, and respectfully, there are some components to it that are worth saving. Not only that, we tend to continue on the use. It currently, or at the time, was the Southeast Asian Market after, obviously, the OP Skaggs building. It also had a bakery, and it is the home of Pho 28, which is a Vietnamese restaurant. We decided to take all of those elements, and what we talked to the public about was in building to scale and making sure that we respectfully design something with neighbors and community in mind. We feel like this specific block face is going to be the connector for the 9-line corridor connecting. What the city primarily wants is to connect the east and the west side of the corridor and bring people together. We decided to call this project, this block face, which is from 4th East to Denver Street, the Milk Block. And the reason for that is during the rezone application, I was trying to find something inspiring about what and how we could develop this property. And there was a speech that was made by Harvey Milk. He was standing on a stoop in a neighborhood in the Castro district in San Francisco, and one of the lines that he presented during his speech was, "I believe in building community, one neighborhood at a time." And so we decided to name, in that spirit, we called our development the Milk Block, because we believe in building community one block at a time. So we're very proud. We are in negotiations with we have 3 leases underway. Our primary anchor tenant will be the Wasatch Co-op grocery store. They've been trying to find a home for a very long time, and we are very proud that they will become our anchor tenant. Pho 28 is our current tenant now. He is going to be closing down at the end of the month, and he will be coming back. We are rebuilding him a brand new space, and we are committed to doing that, as well as Ma's Pizza, New York style pizza. Their first location is in Provo, I believe. They have a second one in Daybreak, and so we will be their Salt Lake City location. And then future home of Pie Party Bakery and Cafe. Currently on our block is Manoli Restaurant and Basalt Day Spa, all local small businesses. And I just want to reiterate that we are shrinking down our building by 1,046 square feet, shrinking, not adding to the main footprint, out of consideration of opening up Grace Court to help alleviate congestion so that we can service the commercial spaces as well as just 4 live-in workspaces, which, by the way, all have their own assigned covered parking stalls. 4 apartments, 4 assigned covered parking stalls. So we're really quite proud of the project, and we hope that we are scheduled to present again on May 18th at Liberty Wells Community Council. And I thank you for your consideration and your time.
Thank you. Hang in there. And are there any questions at this time from the commission?
Yeah, I just want to clarify for Trevor, what's the required parking in this zone?
Oh, the required, like the minimum parking requirement? I don't know that off the top of my head. I think I do have it in my staff report, but looks like Mary has it.
Just for this project in particular, let's see, let me look through this. The required parking is 33 stalls. We've not taken any reductions at this point. There are reductions available. And the parking provided is 37 stalls.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Trevor, I have a question on Grace Court. So in your staff report, you listed that it was public and privately owned. So I'm assuming this northern end is the private part, or is the one that goes north-south private?
Let's see. So the section directly behind the building is private. Maybe I could pull up a map or maybe just a different slide. It's kind of weird though. About halfway through Grace Court, it changes from private to public. So the further south section that's wider, that's the public part. The narrow part directly behind them.
So like
is
half
private.
of the actual street behind the building, half of that is?
So
Thinking it was still a little different, so.
So here's Grace Court, so like
Yeah.
this half forward is private, and then this way back is public.
So like the access on that end. Okay. Who owns it then?
Usually with private streets, it belongs to, or ownership is, and maintenance is responsibility of adjacent property owners, so that's probably the case. Yeah, I didn't.
Do you have two adjacent property owners? Them and then that one house? The side of that house? If I'm understanding where the private-public
The private
component is.
drive actually turns. It's actually L-shaped. So I think there's like 6 or 7 adjacent property owners, maybe
Yeah,
more.
but that would be on the public street, right?
It's super confusing. It's so running from Williams Avenue up Grace Court, north to south, there's a public portion. It stops partway, begins to be private, and turns.
So it stops partway on the section from behind the building to Williams?
Correct.
Oh, not on the L part. That's all private as well? Okay,
I believe the section right behind the market is private.
okay,
The entire section behind the market is private.
okay. That's kind of, I wanted to understand that a little better. Thank you.
There's a parking lot for use of Grace Court residents, and that's owned by the city and maintained by the city?
That's what I've looked up.
That's what
That's what
the
appeared,
sign
yeah.
said
And
on
there's
that.
a sign, yes.
Yeah, so they have like neighborhood stickers on their cars or something.
I think so. I'm not sure if it's required.
Okay, I don't remember if a public comment said that people on Grace Court use your parking lot for parking. Oh, there was a comment that the businesses across the street use your parking lot for parking. Right? Does that comport with what you guys remember?
Yeah.
Any other questions right now? Okay, we'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this item? I think I have one card here. Kelly Markets. You can step up to that microphone right there, state your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes. That one, yep.
My name is Kelly Bargetts, and I live directly behind this proposed building. In this whole demonstration, I have yet to see what would be called a loading zone for this prospectus, and all I know is ever since this building has been bought by Kathia Property Investments, the Grace Court Street, which is a public right-of-way, has been nothing but incriminated upon by semi-trucks, loading trucks, et cetera, and so forth, where us as residents need to get through. So I'd like to start with the initial area where we see the back end of the building, where I don't see too much literature in the demonstration, but I did do some measurements, and the small little area that is right next to the Grace Court area, which again is a public right-of-way street, is only 7 feet wide. And I've heard that Mrs. Kathia wants to break off part of the building on an existing structure, but yet the 7 feet is too narrow. You can't even get in a public, a private van or something like that because the axle base of the car is 7 feet. I have seen a diagram where they want to propose to put 2 more structures, and directly in front of one of the doors, which would lead up to the structure, is parked a little tiny car, which would maybe be for, I don't know, very small little people, but it's parked right in front of the door. So if it's parked in front of the door, I don't know how people are going to get out of these proposed structures. Let's say if there was a fire, And again, that structure only being 7 feet wide is being used up to date as a loading zone is impeding upon the residents of the area that need to use the Grace Court structure.
Thank you, Mr. Markets. That's your 2 minutes.
Pardon?
That's your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, 2 minutes. I thought I
Yeah.
got 3. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? Go up to the microphone and state your name for the record.
Hi there, my name is Manoli Katsanabis, and I own Manoli's Restaurant right on the corner of 4th East and 9th South. And we've been there for almost 8 years now. And basically all of our trucks that come through always come through Grace Court, and it would just help out so much to be able to have more loading zone. We get anywhere from 15 to 30 deliveries, vendors, and everything a week between trash pickups and all of that. And it's really hard to be able to get people through that street in a safe way, and so it would just creates a lot of congestion. So it'd be really nice if it would open up. Kathia is awesome. She's really done a lot for the community, a lot for our neighborhood, and we wouldn't even have a business if they didn't take a risk on us. And I fully support this project, and I think it's awesome, and I think Grace Court, if it can be widened, would be great. So,
Thank you. Ma'am, there you go. State your name for the record.
My name is Stephanie Baranek. I am a board member of the Wasatch Cooperative Market, and I'm also a commercial real estate agent. I specialize in retail leasing and sales. I just want to speak generally in support of the Milk Block project. I think that it has been a pleasure working with Kathia. It isn't very often that you come across a developer that is interested in preserving the architecture and historic significance of a building instead of tearing it down, as well as taking a chance on local businesses. I think that the investment in our local economy is quite impressive, and her commitment to working with local businesses is also very impressive. Specifically as it relates to the co-op for loading and unloading on Grace Court, widening Grace Court would be a significant benefit to all of the retailers that will be occupying that building, and will definitely reduce congestion through that section of the development. And so the co-op is also in favor of that. And just like Manoli, we would also like to say thank you, Kathia, for taking a chance on a startup community-owned grocery store. We're really excited to service the neighborhood and be part of the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this item? Going once, twice? Anyone? Are you thinking about it? Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, seeing no one else, I will close the public hearing on this matter and we'll bring it back up to the commission for discussion or a motion.
I just want to make a couple of comments. One is I'm always thrilled when I see an adaptive reuse. When I first read that, I just get all excited because that's really rare. And I want to note that Grace Court is interesting. I'm going to ask Trevor. So the proposed one-way going west is only for that section behind the building. It doesn't pertain to the rest of Grace Court, correct?
As far as I know, all of Grace Court's one way. Is that okay?
It's currently one way.
Yeah, we from the parking lot of the market, we can't access Grace Court except for directly behind our building.
Okay.
And that is where we plan on eliminating 1,000 square feet, so about 8 feet.
Well, I wanted to address that actually when we were talking a little bit about dimensions. I'm not quite sure how wide Grace Court is. I don't have those dimensions with me. But the area that we're providing at the back of the building by eliminating that pop out at the south is actually 12 feet. So it's currently, the rear wall sits 8 feet back where it's not on the property line. So we'll actually push the whole building 12 feet back so that all of that everything that's happening back there happens on Kathia's property.
We're trying to contain everything, so all service areas remain on our property, on site, never in, just to, again, alleviate congestion and out of respect for our neighbors, and also of the businesses.
So I would also just make a general comment that the current configuration of that building as it pertains to Grace Court would be grandfathered in. So any property owner could leave it as is. And yet they're looking at how they can widen it and contain it on site. And so I think any impact to Grace Court is actually preferable under this. They don't have to do that. Grace Court could continue to exist as it does today. So I think we're seeing an improvement over existing conditions for Grace Court, as well as the adaptive reuse, which I'm really excited to see what lies underneath all that stucco. I'll have to keep an eye on that. If there's no other comments, oh, you're going to comment, Amy? Go for it.
I love this plan. I think it's cool. I think it'll be cool. It's a cool neighborhood. Grace Court is a very cool little neighborhood where it curves around in there. I didn't know it existed, but I'm glad to know now that it exists. So I like this project, and I like the improvements that you're making to the neighborhood, and think that the residents on Grace Court will be happy. Like their problems will be better when you make these changes.
Yeah, I'm
If I
willing to
can
make a
make
motion.
one quick
Oh, go ahead.
comment. Also love this idea, and I think we've had some comments about the CB zoning in general and how we actually get to the point where we get local businesses going into the CB zone, because we've had some problems where we see developments we're not super excited about in the CB zone. And I think a lot of it is just how do we get to the point where local tenants can actually afford the rents? And if we set it up so it's easy for certain very profitable uses, but might kind of have negative externalities on the community, to be able to bid the highest for that land, it really, I think, shoots us in the foot. So as I think staff consider kind of what we're doing with the CB zone, I think this is the sort of development we want to see, and how we get the zoning code to align with that is really important, because I hear consistently, from small business owners, like, oh, I'd love to start a business in that neighborhood. I really can't afford that rent because a national chain went into that district. And I've heard this specifically about Crack Shack, national chain. All my neighbors have said, oh yeah, I can't start a business there because they just bid too much. Anyway, I'll stop. I'll let Amy make a motion.
Okay.
Duly noted. I don't know anything about the Crack Shack. I have a feeling that's a place
Well, you may
I
find out.
I don't frequent much. Okay, so Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the commission approve this application with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Berry and a second by Commissioner Christensen. Commissioner Gent.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle.
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira.
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes, with thumbs up.
Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. Good luck. You got a unanimous approval.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and all of your commitment to building Salt Lake. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you. And I guess Trevor gets to stay here, right?
Yep, lucky me.
Okay. So we'll move on to item number 4, the zoning map and master plan amendment at approximately 1815 South State. Case numbers PLN PCM 2022-00999 and PLN PCM 2022-00998.
Alrighty, hello again, everyone. Here we go. This is a zoning map and master plan amendment request for 4 properties located at approximately 1815 South State Street. The applicant is requesting to change the zoning of the properties from R1 5000 single-family residential and CC corridor commercial to RMU residential mixed use to facilitate the development of a mixed-use project. There are currently single-family homes on the two properties on Coatesville Ave and commercial buildings on the two properties facing State Street. The applicant intends to repurpose the vacant furniture store at 1815 South State and demolish the remaining 3 buildings. This request includes a master plan amendment because the future land use designation of these properties are community, commercial, and low-density residential, which does not support changing the zoning of these properties to RMU. The applicant is requesting to change the future land use designations of these properties to high-density mixed use. Staff is recommending approval with a few conditions that I'll go over later in the presentation. Because this application is proposing a zoning amendment that would allow non-residential uses, it is subject to the city's housing loss mitigation ordinance. Under the ordinance, there are 3 options for mitigating the loss of existing housing units. The applicant has chosen option A, build replacement housing. A housing loss mitigation report has been reviewed and approved by the Director of Community and Neighborhoods and is attached to the staff report. When the staff report was published, staff had received 5 emailed comments. 3 comments were in support of the proposal and 2 were in opposition. Concerns mentioned in the comments received are related to street parking, building height, traffic, and light pollution. A comment in support of the request has been received from the chair of the Liberty Wells Community Council. This is the subject site with zoning on the left. The map on the right shows the future land use designations of these properties from the Central Community Future Land Use Map, which are consistent with the property's current zoning designations. The subject site is also within the South State Street Corridor Overlay District, which imposes additional development standards for new construction that are intended to create a more enhanced product and push development closer to State Street. Zoning is pretty consistent with the land use in the area, with mostly single-family homes to the east and small-scale commercial uses to the north and south. The BP zoning to the west is the OC Tanner campus. The area is well served by transit and other amenities. State Street and 2100 South are served by frequent transit network bus routes, and the 1700 South bus route is slated for service improvements. The site is less than a mile from several schools and grocery stores. Bike lanes are available on Main Street and 300 East. Now I'll quickly go over a comparison of the current and proposed zones. This table is not a comprehensive comparison. I've just included it in this presentation to highlight a few key differences. The proposed RMU zoning allows multifamily buildings by right up to 75 feet, while the existing CC zone limits to buildings to 45 feet through the design review process, and R1 5000 limits buildings to 28 feet. Staff is recommending conditions to address impacts related to building height. The current zoning designations require between 1 and 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit. There is no minimum parking requirement in RMU. The applicant has stated that they intend to build approximately 190 off-street parking spaces. And then finally, no front or side yard setback is required in RMU, only a rear yard setback of 25% of the lot depth or 30 feet, whichever is less. And here are a few examples of what has been built under the RMU zoning designation in other areas of the city. And here are the conditions that staff is recommending. The first condition would require a 30-foot rear yard setback from the eastern boundary of the subject site, regardless of building orientation of future development. The applicant is already proposing a 30-foot setback from the eastern property line on their conceptual drawings, but there's no guarantee that this plan will actually be developed. If future development of the site orients buildings to the north or south, the eastern setback could be considered a side yard rather than a rear yard, which would allow up to a 75-foot building to be built with minimal setback to the single-family homes to the east. The second condition would impose a 1-to-1 step back requirement in addition to the 30-foot setback requirement, as shown on this diagram. Each additional foot of building height above 30 feet would be required to be stepped back an additional foot from the east property line. This would limit building height at the 30-foot setback line to 60 feet in height and only applies to the portion of the building that is located between 30 feet and 45 feet from the single-family homes to the east. The third condition would require a 10-foot landscape buffer along the eastern boundary as required by the zoning ordinance. And don't worry, I'm not going to read all that text. The fourth condition would require that the existing furniture building at 1815 South State is repurposed with the redevelopment of the site. The applicant's proposal includes an adaptive reuse component that would repurpose this building for commercial use. This condition ensures that this building will be repurposed if the property is sold after the amendment is approved or if development plans change. The fifth and final condition clarifies that these conditions only apply when the abutting properties are zoned single-family residential. If the properties to the east were ever rezoned to a zoning designation that allows building heights greater than 35 feet, these conditions would no longer apply to development on this site. Now, I'll briefly touch on how this proposal complies with applicable plans and policies. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all this text either. These are just a few goals and objectives I've pulled from the plans that are applicable to this site. So the Central Community Master Plan is the neighborhood plan for this site, and it does not really support this request. Like many of our older master plans, this plan really tries to limit density outside of downtown. This plan was adopted in 2005, which was a time in Salt Lake City history with very different market conditions and housing demand. Citywide goals for more modern plans like Growing SLC and Plan Salt Lake acknowledge the current housing shortage and are intended to increase the amount of housing in the city overall. Some of these plans specifically call for additional density and mixed use near major transportation corridors like State Street. While the proposal is not entirely consistent with the Community Master Plan, staff believes that other citywide goals and objectives for more modern plans, along with changed market conditions, justify the proposed master plan and zoning map amendment. Staff believes that with the recommended conditions, development at this site could be made compatible with existing development under the proposed RMU designation. So based on the analysis of standards for zoning amendments, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council with 4 conditions. And that is it for my presentation, and my applicant is here as well.
Okay, why don't you bring your applicant up? If you need another chair, you can pull one up.
How's it going?
So I need you to speak into the microphones and introduce yourselves so that you're on the record, and then you'll have 10 minutes to make a presentation, and then we'll come back to you with questions.
I'm Brian Scott. I'm the project architect.
I am Tessa Arneson, founder of the Maven District.
I'm Abir Malik with Colmena Group. All right, so so as previously stated, this is
That's something else.
that's not our project. Full screen with it or something.
Yeah. It's on here somewhere. David, where's the full screen button? Sorry.
You're good.
Tech help.
Yeah, here he comes.
Is there a PDF reader if you download it instead of doing it through Chrome? And then yeah, that one. Chrome or something.
Saving the day again.
Okay, great. So, I'm here with Tessa and Abir. They're from Colmena, the Colmena Group and Maven, who have partnered on this project that we call Maven State. And Colmena is a developer.
Probably need to get a little closer to the microphone or pull it over to you, whatever works.
Gotcha. How about now?
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Colmena is a local developer with a very wide array of project types and a lot of experience in developing. And then they've partnered with the Maven Group, who is also a developer, and they have focused more on small local businesses, and in particular on how to help underserved founders start businesses. So how to help people get over some of the hurdles to entrepreneurship. And there are two kind of shared ideals between these groups that have really cemented and throughout this project and made it. The first is a desire to bring some new life to State Street. It's such an important part of our city. It's got so much potential, and there's a huge need and desire for some kind of development and redevelopment along State Street. Some of the kind of planning documents that have come out of that, like Life on State and the State Street CRA, are, because of that, are the kind of first thing we turned to when we were putting this together, and they're where we pulled things like building heights and step backs and things like that from. The State Street CRA, actually, one of the exercises that they did was a poll on where people wanted redevelopment, and this specific site is the number 2 option that people selected, so there's a huge desire for redevelopment here. Some of the kind of reasons that the site has sat for so long, because Fidel's warehouse has sat empty for about 20 years, and the property next to it has been on and off occupied, but has now sat empty for a number of years as well. Are the commercial corridor zoning, which the Life on State plan kind of deals with some of the issues that imposes on doing redevelopment there. And then one thing specific to this site is the fact that it's split zoned. So this large property, which is the Fidel's warehouse property, and the parking lot behind it are split between commercial corridor and single family. And so it's really hard to do anything with it. You really have to go and rezone it to get them together. This are some images of the site, and I'm sure you will recognize it. It's very prominent on State Street. It's something I've always noticed. And the second kind of through line for this project has really been adaptive reuse. It was a really early decision to make this building an adaptive reuse. They looked at it and saw a lot of potential and saw that even though it's sat for a long time, there's still a lot there and a lot of character. And so we want to kind of restore that and bring that back. And that's really where the kind of seed of potential for the entire project came from. Is it started with looking at this building and how we could reuse it, and then expanded from there to talk about what we could add that would complement that use and what kind of things would go well with it and kind of work with it. This is just a little bit about the history of the building. It's been there for quite a while, but like I said, it has sat for 20 years or so. And so the result of all that we did is this site plan. This is our proposal. And so to keep this existing building, we're proposing to do a multifamily residential building that kind of wraps around the building and creates these alleyways and large open marketplaces in between them that can be used for markets, for events, for things like that. I think this next slide gives you a little bit better idea of it in 3D. So it's this large L shape that wraps around the existing building. And the apartment complex has, as mentioned before, 3 levels of parking. So we want to make sure that we are supplying ample parking. It's got commercial all along State Street. It's got large plazas, and then the adaptive reuse portion, which will have shops, restaurants, office spaces, things like that. And so this is just a look back at that original elevation to see some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So using this large kind of outdoor corridor as a marketplace, and not trying to really change the bones and character of the existing building, but to go in and make what is already interesting about it better. Got some plans here just showing the parking layout that we're suggesting, And the apartment layout, we've got a good mixture of units. We're looking at doing a number of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and some 3 bedrooms as well, so that there can be a good mix of of people there. And then this is just to give a little bit of idea for the scale. As mentioned before, we met with staff, planning staff, a number of times, and went back and forth to try and figure out the best way to mitigate any negative impact on the existing residential homes in the area. And so we talked about all the things that were brought up as requirements before, about setbacks, step backs, landscape requirements, and just ways to try and minimize the intrusion, if any, of that. And we looked at kind of solar studies, and we did shadow studies, and what we came up with was this step back requirement, which is, we looked at other step back requirements in Salt Lake, and then what we looked at is what's allowed there existing. So the only thing different between this slide and what you saw before is the kind of lighter box that sticks out, which shows that for the commercial corridor right now, what's allowed is that 45-foot at 10 feet off of the property line. And that's what we use to kind of set as the base point and then slope out from there. And with that, I will turn it over to these guys to speak a little bit more on the project.
Can we get a time check?
Oh, sorry.
Just real quick, Abir Malik with Colmena Group. I was in front of you all virtually a few years ago with the Sears project. Through that project, really fell in love with the Life on State vision, and this project is helping to fulfill some of that vision. And I'll turn it over to Tessa.
Adaptive reuse is all we do, and local is all we do. And if you don't know much about Maven, we are a group over on 9th South, and we have 100+ locally owned businesses that rent from us. And of those 100+ businesses, 75% of them are women owned. So we really lean into how can we do this even better with each property. Now we really push into how can we lower the barrier of entry for people to start their businesses, for people to gather, for first-time entrepreneurs to get their dreams off the ground. And we know that this really purpose-built place, we've learned a lot in the last, we've been around since about 2015-ish, starting our first project. So we've learned a lot about what people need when they start a business, and one of them is very flexible spaces, size-wise, rent-wise, flexible leases, easy-to-read leases. These are all things that we really believe in, and we think if we can build something like this can be. I grew up in Ogden and have known State Street to be I don't want to use the word plight because I feel opportunity is better for my entire life. So I look forward to being part of the change, and we appreciate your time and energy. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicants at this point?
I have a question for staff. So, Trevor, in one of the conditions that you've listed, 3B, can you give me a reasoning why you want a 4-foot tall shrub planted along a 6-foot tall solid fence?
Yeah, great question. That is the landscaping buffer requirements as written in the code now. We kind of scratch our head at that one because it kind of, like you said, it kind of doesn't make sense to have a 4-foot tall shrub, 6-foot tall fence, but that's what's in the code now. So the condition is just you have to do a landscape buffer as required in the code, and that's what's written in the code now.
Hopefully
never
the
seen it
shrubs
spelled out.
grow.
What?
Hopefully the shrubs grow.
Higher than 4 feet?
Yeah.
Want trees, we can do trees.
Yeah, I'd rather have trees. So I've never seen it spelled out this way. So that's why I was curious, you know.
Oh, as far as just it written out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, so the condition says a landscape buffer as required in the zoning ordinance or something similar to that. So that is how it's written now. is probably going to be changes to the landscape chapter in the near future. So that's why it just says as written in the code. So if they apply for building purpose tomorrow, they'll be vested under the current landscape requirements, which is that. But you know, if the new ones are put in place by the time they apply for permits, they'll have to comply with whatever the new landscape buffer requirements are.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll open the public hearing on this item. I have 2 cards here. Tim Redmond. Okay, go up to the microphone, state your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
I'm Tim Redmond, and I just oppose the 75-foot height. I sent email about light pollution concerns because right now we can watch bats, and I'm wondering about privacy in the backyards, how that falls into it. You know, might want to garden nude, and right now you can do that in our neighborhood. After this, probably not a possibility anymore safely. And then the traffic, the road going behind it, I'm wondering about that, like why it has to be an entrance not off of State Street where the cars all drive, why it has to come down the side residential streets. Because right now there is an entrance to the Fidels on State Street, or there was before they dug a hole. So those are my main concerns.
Okay, thank you. Come on. And I have another card from Robin Allgood. Step right on up, state your name for the record, and you will have 2 minutes also.
I'm Robin Allgood. I'm the property owner on the east side of the parking lot. The family has owned that property now for 65 years. We've watched Fidels grow and decline. Until the past 20 years, there's been nothing but run by prostitution, drug use, homeless, you name it. I've seen it there, which needs to stop. My problem of this property proposal is just basically a couple-fold. 175-foot height. I don't think either one of you here would like to have a 75-foot piece of building looking over your backyard. That's a big problem there. That's really, you know, with my property being 135 years old, that's kind of a little bite. So that's my big concern right there. So 4 floors like they have at the Capitol Motel, I'm fine with, but 7, I'm not really proud of that because I'm having no privacy at all in my backyard. At that point, they might as well buy me out. Second problem that we have here, again, like Tim had said, parking. Capitol Homes says, oh, well, we're not going to have much problem with parking. Go look at their parking. They're now parking on Coatesville and the other street behind it. So now those people that own those homes on those 2 streets, the residents from the Capitol Apartments are now parking on there, so there is no room for visitors. So that's a big plus right there that needs to be looked at. And the third is, you know, you're building right next to my property. I'd love to have a 6-foot block wall there so I don't have all the trash coming into my property. Those are my concerns. Other than that, I'd be happy to have somebody come in and do something with that property because it's been sitting so long. Fire set in that building. It needs to be either razzed or built up and cherished. Turn it to a park if nothing else. Take the motel with it too, please.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this? Step up and state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Brenda Weinberg. I live on the 100 block of Coatesville Avenue. I echo what the previous speakers just said, but I have some context as well for in relation to our other zoning laws. I agree that this should be rezoned. I don't mind higher density, but high density is probably not appropriate because of the nature of all of the low density single family homes to the east. Let's just look at some of the lower density purposes. For example, RMU 35 and 45 say they are to promote appropriately scaled development that is pedestrian oriented, intended to provide a buffer for lower density residential uses, and nearby collector arterial streets and higher intensity land uses. That's what the issue is, that there would be no buffer, which would be in line with the city plan. And as the staff has said, there are many things that do not comply or not in line with the city plan currently. Whereas the proposed zoning is to reinforce mixed-use character of the area and encourage the development of areas as high-density residential urban neighborhoods. This district is appropriate in areas of the city where the applicable master plans support high-density mixed-use development. That is not what we have here. We have all single-family home, low residential to the east. And as an example of the other homes or the other buildings that were given as comparable developments, those are, at 300 South and 300 East, very high density areas. 260 South, 500 East, they have, bars in the vicinity, a liquor store abutting the 3rd East, 3rd South, for example. It's all just closed by saying, high-density rezoning would not fit the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any discussion? A motion? We're a real talkative bunch tonight, right?
So I have a question about the traffic circulation, the entrance and exits that was brought up. Do you want to respond to that comment of keeping traffic off of the side streets so that they're entering and exiting off of close to State Street?
So I think the reason that we went.
Sorry to interrupt.
You need to get up to the microphone. Yeah.
Sorry. So the existing properties, the space between them is what a while ago was an entrance off of State. There's also an entrance off Downington into that, and then another one off Coatesville. And the reason we went to those instead is because we really want to make this central area like a lively kind of urban space that.
Not a parking lot?
Yeah, that's not a parking lot. And have kind of events there and have the shopping spill out into that area and make it a real kind of public usable courtyard, so.
Can I just say one more thing? The other thing is State Street, as you know, is a UDOT road. There's a bus stop right in front of our property. Having vehicular transit cutting around a bus is somewhat problematic, and so we elected to use the side street access as the primary access to the parking structure.
Anyone else? More questions?
I feel sympathetic to the neighbors who live near there. There was talk about putting in a really big apartment building in my neighborhood and accessing it instead of from the main street, accessing it from the side street. And people were worried about that. I think, though, that having an empty lot for your neighbor for 20 years is pretty bad, too. Or a broken down building is pretty bad. And lots of times the things that make neighborhoods better are more people. So I expect that neighbors, families and neighbors will be better neighbor to you than an empty building that's being used for all this, illegal stuff or something. I'm hopeful for that. I think it's probable. The way that they're citing the store, reusing the store that's already built there, which is interesting. It's an interesting, curved wall and stuff like that. Those could be great neighbors. Those could be an interesting, lively place in your neighborhood that there's to walk to. And State Street is important to all of us, although it's different when it's your neighborhood, right? When you have lived there for a long time. So I feel empathy for the way that feels, but I'm also hopeful that State Street will be better, and this part will be better with a development like this.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the more we develop State Street, the more walkable it becomes and the safer the neighborhood becomes. And then you can have a place in your neighborhood that you want to go and visit and you want to go and walk to from your house, which is a great amenity, really. It probably doesn't feel that safe when there's people hanging out in front of the building, and this will give you that opportunity to have places where you can go to a restaurant and sit outside and enjoy yourself versus not feeling safe in your neighborhood. So I think those are things that will be added to these neighborhoods. I think all of State Street kind of has this happening where there's different zones that are so close to State Street when State Street really needs to be kind of flanked with these types of developments. And as we kind of grow as a city, there's a huge opportunity on State Street to continue this type of development. So
I think the conditions are thoughtful too, about when there's residential next to it, like you have a solid wall. That will happen, so garbage can't blow from here to there. And the step back of the building and the setback, it seems like a thoughtful way to rezone this property.
Yeah, I very much concur with Commissioners Lee and Burrows. I am sympathetic to the feeling of losing privacy. That was a unique private thing that you wanted to do. We hear many complaints about loss of privacy. That was a unique one. So thank you for a refreshing change at the Planning Commission. That said, we are, this is not your neighborhood specifically. Week in, week out, we hear these requests for kind of densification across the city, and it is always a struggle because we know we need more housing and it needs to go somewhere, and all of us have to give up just a little bit of privacy, unfortunately, as we add density. And I know it can be upsetting when it's right next door to you, but unfortunately, it's just something we're doing across the city. It's really kind of citywide. So I just want to emphasize that all of us are sort of feeling a little bit of loss of privacy. And thank you for entertaining us. Again, that was, we usually have like 5 buckets of these comments, and that one was really unique. Thank you.
I have a procedural question. We've got 2 different motion sheets. Do we need to make 2 separate motions?
Yeah, pardon me, there's a master plan amendment and a rezone amendment, so.
Gotcha.
No, just tell
Mike,
us
I'll
which
second
one
them
you're
when you do
doing. Oh, okay. All right. So Commissioner Christensen, you're on the...
Okay. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council approve this proposal for a zoning map amendment with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Commissioner Burrows. Commissioner Berry.
Yeah, so I want to just make a couple comments in relation to my vote. So I live in an area that has apartments really across the street, right behind me, 4 stories, 6 stories. I don't garden nude, but I do hang my laundry out, and I feel like if they want to look at it, good for them, I guess. But I hear you. It is something that I deal with daily. 75 feet is... I'm struggling with that component, but I do think that the conditions are thoughtful, as Commissioner Burrows stated. And, the Comena Group has done projects in my neighborhood, and they've been great community partners. I haven't had an opportunity to work with either of you in my community aspects, but I think there's what I'm struggling with the 75 feet step back is kind of countered by your 3 partners of like how I feel you're going to be good community members and good for the neighborhood. So I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Christensen?
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee?
yes.
Commissioner Gent?
Yes.
The chair will also vote yes.
I need to vote. I'll vote yes,
Did I miss you?
but I'm a yes.
Okay, yes. Thank you. So we have that's for the amendment. Can we get a motion on the The change in zoning,
The master plan.
the master plan, yeah.
I'll go ahead and do that one too. Based on the information presented in discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council approve this proposal for a master plan amendment.
Oh, I'll second.
All right. So I have a motion by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Commissioner Burrows. Commissioner Burrows? Yes. Commissioner Christensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Barry?
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Gent?
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. You got unanimous approvals for a positive recommendation on both of those, so good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for your time. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Haberdashery is coming. We can do it in this building.
Madam Chair, may we take a 5-minute recess?
Okay, five. You got five.
7:31.
Okay.
7:31, I will be back.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, we're down to the last item this evening. So, item number 5, site distance triangle amendment, PLN PCM 2023-000546. Madison.
Hi, so this is a text amendment for...
You're going to have to speak
Oh,
up.
sorry. This is a text amendment for the site distance triangle. Mayor Aaron Mendenhall has initiated a petition to amend the zoning ordinance regulations regarding the site distance triangle. The proposed changes will be to sections 21A62, which is the definitions chapter, and that's to update the definition of the site distance triangle, 21A3602, and 21A4005, which is the lot and bulk controls for principal and accessory buildings, and it's to apply the visual clearance standards to those. And 21A40-120 to clarify the language for regulations for fences, walls, and hedges, and additionally other provisions of 21A. And staff recommendation is to forward a positive recommendation to City Council. So a little bit of a background, what the site distance triangle is, it's a clear zone area identified at the intersections of streets, driveways or alleys and streets, and driveways or alleys and sidewalks. And this is where obstructions are restricted. And the purpose of this is to ensure unobstructed vision of oncoming traffic for all modes of transportation at potential points of conflict, and provides distance so drivers have time to identify and react to potential conflict, which increases safety. The current code defines the site distance triangle at the intersection of streets and driveways and sidewalks, but it's silent on alleys. And alleys operate in a similar manner to driveways intersecting with streets and sidewalks. Additionally, the height restrictions are only referenced in the fence section and only apply to fence, walls, and hedges. The purpose of this amendment is to correct these issues and remedy the gaps in the code. And one of those gaps is the intersection of alleys. And since alleys operate in a similar manner as driveways, they present a similar risk to oncoming traffic and should be included in the site distance triangle standards. The proposed amendment modifies the site distance triangle definition by adding language to include alleys in the standards. Additionally, the graphic here, we are going to be updating the illustrations that are in the code, and this just shows the how it would also apply to an alley. Another issue in the code is the inconsistent application of the clear zone standards, where the purpose is to define an area which vision obstructions are prohibited. The term's only referenced in the regulations for fences, walls, and hedges. And since there's no reference made in other parts of the code, other structures, including buildings, are currently allowed to encroach on the site distance triangle areas. This creates inconsistent application of the clear zone standards and opens doors to hazardous conditions at intersections. To correct this, staff is proposing to add standards to both 21A62 or 3602 for the site distance triangle to apply to principal buildings, and 21A4005 for it to apply to accessory structures. Additionally, this proposal includes other minor changes to the language in 21A44060 and 21A4120 to clarify recently adopted amendments and ensure application as intended. These changes include expanding the standards for the location of driveways in proximity to street intersections to apply to all zoning districts, correcting code references, and clarifying fence standards. Additionally, one thing to note is that this proposal does not impact landscaping in the location of street and private trees. The height of other plants within the site distance triangle is being addressed in a separate text amendment and will be consistent with the existing standards in the proposed amendment, and all the changes are included in the staff report in attachment A. How would this amendment impact existing structures? So any legally existing fence, building, or other structure that encroaches on the site distance triangle at the intersection of an alley and a street or driveway would not be impacted by this proposal and permitted to remain and its use continued. Any sort of modifications would be subject to Chapter 21A38, which is the non-compliant structures. As discussed in the staff report, the proposal supports the goals identified in Plan Salt Lake. It helps support Principle 1, neighborhoods, and Principle 4, transportation and mobility. And it's going to help to increase safety for all modes of transportation at all points of potential conflict, reduces the risk for accidents at intersections, creates safer environment for walking and biking, and make transportation options more viable. The amendment was sent to all the city's recognized community organizations, and no formal comment was submitted. This was presented at the Sugar House Community Council, and the overall response was positive. And there was was posted to an online open house, and there was no public input received. And staff recommendation that the commission forward a favorable recommendation on this request to the city council.
Thank you. Any questions for Madison? Okay. And obviously you don't have a, oh, you do?
I have a quick
Okay.
question. So if you look at page 8 and page 9, I think the diagrams are a little bit confusing, where one has a driveway that has like a mow strip and the other one looks like there's more of just a sidewalk there. When you're taking that dimension, I just want to make sure that that's kind of clear in the standard when it goes out. So I just wanted to double check on that, because it looks like you're cutting into the yards at the sidewalk on one option, and then you're cutting from the street on the other option in the diagram.
Yeah, so the two diagrams, one is a diagram where there's a street with a sidewalk.
And then the other one's without the sidewalk.
Without a sidewalk. So it's going to be to the property line.
Because
Because
it still kind of looks like in the diagram there's a sidewalk. That's what's kind of deceiving about it. That's all I'm making. If there's a way to make that a little clearer,
Yeah.
when you guys actually print this, that would be helpful.
Definitely.
Anyone else?
That's it.
Okay, we will open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? I've got one person in the audience. No, okay. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
I just have a comment now.
Okay.
I do want to thank that you've included alleys. That's a huge problem. The alley that I use for accessing my garage, the person on the corner has built her fence up to the sidewalk, and you cannot see until you're in the sidewalk. So it is a big pedestrian safety issue. So I'm really thrilled that you've expanded this to include those. And I'm fully in support of everything you've done. So it's a good job.
Anyone else?
I love it. I'd like to make a motion.
Please do.
Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council approve this zoning text amendment proposal.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Burrows and a second from Commissioner De Oliveira. Commissioner Gent,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner De Oliveira,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Barry.
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. So we've got a positive recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other business? Then I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.